No one truly knows where the Blood Ravens came from. They simply appeared, not birthed from fire and war like many chapters, nor tied to a clear Primarch's legacy. They emerged in the swirling records of the 37th millennium, late, obscure, and unknown, a chapter with no cradle, no father, only silence and dust behind them. Their earliest records, what little remain, are fragmentary scrolls sealed in stasis locks or hidden deep within the Librarium Sanctorum. Even the Blood Ravens themselves do not claim to know their gene-sire. And in the Imperium, where bloodlines are sacred and origins are fate, this is more than a curiosity. It is a heresy whispered only behind closed doors. They do not bear the features of any single Primarch. Their tactics echo the versatility of Guilliman. Their zeal mirrors the fervor of the Black Templars, and yet their true inheritance lies most clearly in their minds. For where other chapters value martial perfection or unbreakable faith, the Blood Ravens prize knowledge. And that obsession, from their inception, has only grown deeper. They say it is because they wish to understand the galaxy. But beneath that noble purpose lies a desperation, the hunger to find themselves, to fill the empty void of their beginning with answers, with relics, with fragments of truth. Some in the chapter whisper that they are descended from the Raven Guard, citing similarities in their covert deployment tactics and a preference for stealth when the situation demands it. Others point to their name, Blood Ravens, and make the connection to the Blood Angels, who also carry the motif of crimson and the burden of a noble curse. But the most heretical murmurs, the ones not spoken aloud, suggest ties to the First Legion, to the Dark Angels and their terrible secret war of redemption. That perhaps the Blood Ravens were born not from honor but from shame. A hidden offshoot, a redacted failure, a second chance. The truth is buried, if it exists at all. What is certain is that they are not recorded in the great founding rolls. Not in the second founding, nor the third. The first traceable appearance of the Blood Ravens was during the late M37, operating in the Ghoul Stars and subsectors near the Halo Zone. Their methods were strange. They sought out derelict battlefields not for war but for artifacts. They secured lost Xenos ruins and fought to preserve ancient libraries rather than destroy them. When asked their origin, they offered nothing. Their heraldry bore the symbol of a black raven in crimson flight, no ties to any known progenitor. They simply fought, bled, and moved on. To the Adeptus Terra, this was deeply troubling. A chapter of uncertain heritage was a threat, even if loyal, even if effective. Without known gene seed purity, how could they be trusted? The Ordo Hereticus filed inquiries. The Adeptus Mechanicus refused to share Geneseed test results. And yet, every time the Blood Ravens were questioned, their representatives offered the same answer. We serve the Emperor. Our blood is his. That is all that matters. And somehow, impossibly, the matter was allowed to rest. But behind the veil of bureaucracy, others watched. The Inquisition, ever hungry for the scent of corruption, noted the Blood Ravens' strange number of psychers. Nearly every company boasted a librarian of formidable power. In some campaigns, entire squads were led by them. It was unheard of. Some claimed mutation. Others whispered of warp breeding. But all official tests showed nothing tainted, no trace of demonic influence, no deviation from the acceptable thresholds of psychic variance. Just more. More librarians, more dreams, more voices from the warp that only the Blood Ravens seemed willing to listen to. And perhaps that was the first true glimpse into what set them apart. They didn't just tolerate the warp. They explored it, cataloged it, studied its patterns, mapped its tides. Where other chapters warded themselves against its corruption, the Blood Ravens stared into the abyss with eyes unblinking. They did not seek to fall, they sought to understand. And in doing so, they skirted a line most Astartes dare not cross. The line between mastery and madness, between revelation and damnation. In the vaults of the Librarium Sanctorum, it is said there are hundreds, perhaps thousands, of tomes collected over millennia, some written by lost Imperial scholars, others penned by Xenos philosophers, or worse. Each is sealed, catalogued, and marked for restricted study. But they are studied. That is the difference. The Blood Ravens do not burn knowledge out of fear. They consume it, piece by piece, binding it into their rituals, their training, their very way of war. There are even rumors, denied but never disproved, that the Blood Ravens have taken relics from other chapters, that in battles fought side by side with their brethren, they have recovered items from battlefields, relic blades, sacred standards, even gene seed, only for those items to vanish into their vaults, never seen again. They call this safeguarding. Others call it theft. But the Blood Ravens do not care what others call it. To them, everything lost is something to be found, and if the Imperium cannot keep its own history safe, they will. This obsession with knowledge defines them more than any war. Every campaign they fight, every battle they wage, has a secondary purpose. The search for secrets, for artifacts, for data long buried under Xenos ruins or Chaos temples. In some cases, they have rerouted entire crusades to investigate a vision seen in the dreams of a librarian. Their faith is not blind, it is inquisitive. They believe the Emperor's will can be read in the patterns of the past, in forgotten codes, in relics and tomes others have forsaken. And so they seek him in the dust. And yet, for all their brilliance, all their victories, they remain alone. Other chapters view them with suspicion. The Mechanicus do not share with them freely. The Inquisition watches their every move, and they, in turn, hoard their knowledge. They do not share what they learn, not even with their allies. Perhaps because they know what they find is dangerous. Perhaps because they fear what it means. Or perhaps because they already know. Because deep in their hidden vaults, in a stasis-sealed chamber few have seen, lies a truth too terrible to reveal. A truth about where they came from, about what was done to create them, about why they were made to forget. The Blood Ravens were not born, they were hidden, and someday they will find out why. There is a saying among the librarians of the Blood Ravens, to fight with strength alone is to miss the point of war. It is not quoted in any Codex Astartes, nor is it traced to any Primarch's wisdom. It is their own creed, quiet, unspoken, but etched into every decision the chapter makes. From the outside, the Blood Ravens may appear as any other chapter, disciplined, armored, unyielding. But beneath the ceramite and the Vox silence lies an altogether different heart, one that beats not for glory, but for knowledge. And that knowledge is hoarded. They are collectors, curators, archivists of war. Their librarium is not merely a sanctum for psychic communion or strategic review. It is a vault, a labyrinth of sealed catacombs where data slates, stasis coffins, and crypt-kept relics hum with ancient power. Many artifacts are labeled with only a fragmentary identifier. Some have no name at all. Some are not of human make. And yet they are all here, locked beneath the red-lit sanctums of the battle barge Litany of Fury and the strike cruiser Omnis Arcanum. These ships are not merely vessels of war, they are arcs of forbidden memory. From the earliest days of their existence, the Blood Ravens have pursued forgotten things. They descend not only upon battlefields, but upon the ruins of long-dead civilizations. Imperial colonies erased by warp storms, Xenos tomb worlds still humming with psychic echoes, chaos-blighted temples buried beneath layers of heresy and decay. While other chapters arrive to purge and cleanse, the Blood Ravens sift through the ashes. They take what others would leave behind. They study what others would condemn. Their obsession has become a doctrine. Scout initiates are trained not merely in marksmanship and close-quarter combat, but in the arts of archaeology and datamancy. When a Blood Raven steps into a ruin, he does so with reverence. For him, the fractured statue or rusted cogitator might hold the key to understanding a broader truth. A forgotten stratagem, a hidden enemy tactic, or even a trace of the chapter's own scattered past. And once an item is recovered, it is not merely locked away. It is catalogued, studied, cross-referenced, connected. There are stories, some whispered, some recorded, of entire companies vanishing into the depths of a ruined moon or hive-world vault for weeks at a time. Not in battle, but in pursuit. A pursuit of something glimpsed in a vision, or something mentioned in an obscure data fragment from the archives. They return, gaunt, silent, changed, but always carrying something. A shard of technology, a data core, a black-bound tome inscribed in a language not spoken in 1,000 years. To the Blood Ravens, this is victory. This is what they live for. War is not the purpose. It is the path, and yet that path has led them into murky waters. The Imperium tolerates their behavior because of their results, but few trust them. Other chapters whisper of thefts, of sacred relics that go missing after a joint engagement, of databanks mysteriously wiped during Allied crusades. The most infamous of these rumors, though denied by all official record, concerns a relic of the White Scars, a star map etched on a crystalline sphere said to contain warp routes known only to the Khan himself. After a battle alongside the Blood Ravens on the world of Jolkar, the relic vanished. The White Scars blamed the forces of chaos. But some never forgot that a librarian of the Blood Ravens had been seen entering the reliquary chamber hours before the warband retreated. The Blood Ravens offer no explanations. Their public stance is one of denial. If pressed, they respond with protocol. If accused, they offer vague apologies and shift the focus to matters of war. But in private, they continue their acquisitions, not out of malice, not out of greed, but because they believe they must. Every relic, every stolen page, every recovered piece of forgotten lore might bring them closer to the truth. Not merely the truth of their enemies, but the truth of themselves. And what of the items they recover? Some are weaponized, integrated into war gear, reversed engineered by their artificers. The Blood Ravens have been seen wielding plasma weapons with pre-Imperial construction marks or power fists built using STC templates thought lost. But most relics are never used. They are simply kept, stored, guarded. Some have wards etched into the vault doors that contain them. Others are held in null fields, their very presence disruptive to nearby mines. There are items the chapter refuses even to acknowledge exist, their entries sealed behind genetic locks or psychic encryption. Not because the Blood Ravens do not understand them, but because they understand them too well. To the Librarians, this obsession is spiritual. They speak of prophecy, of echoes in the warp that lead them from ruin to ruin. It is said that Chief Librarian Jonah Orion once guided an entire battle barge to a drifting space hulk based only on a single dream. The vessel in question had no warp signature, no Vox beacon. It had been considered lost for centuries, and yet it was there, just as Jonah foresaw. Inside, they found a databank containing fragments of a pre-heresy astropathic code. What it meant is still classified. But after that discovery, Jonah was given unrestricted access to the entire Librarium vault. His word became law among the epistolaries. The obsession with collecting is not limited to lore or weaponry. It bleeds into the chapter's rituals and traditions. Each company maintains its own reliquary. Battle brothers carry memory plates engraved with campaigns they've fought. The most honored veterans wear chains of micro-relics across their armor, shards of fallen banners, fragments of shattered purity seals, even bones from honored dead. These are not merely tokens. They are believed to grant insight, to remind each warrior that every moment in war is another page in the chapter's greater book. Even the chapter's death rites reflect this need to preserve. When a blood raven falls, his armor is not simply buried or incinerated. It is stripped, blessed, and stored. The cogitator cores from his war gear are removed and archived. His memories, if possible, are extracted by librarians and encoded into purity data chains. There are entire cogitator vaults aboard the Litany of Fury that do nothing but cycle the battle thoughts of the dead, stored as raw mnemonic essence. Some say these memories are replayed by librarians in times of need. Others believe they are used to commune with the chapter's ancestors. Whether either is true, only the Blood Ravens know. But obsession has a cost. There are those within the chapter who have disappeared into their studies. Librarians who lock themselves in meditation for decades, emerging broken and hollow-eyed. Astartes who lose themselves not to the warp, but to the labyrinths of forbidden knowledge they carry inside their own minds. The chapter has rituals to guard against this, codified cycles of silence, fasting, psychic cleansing. But the line is thin, and every relic retrieved is another thread in the web they are weaving. A web that might one day catch something even they cannot control. Still they continue. For in every whisper of lost knowledge, the Blood Ravens believe there is a clue, a fragment, a single name perhaps buried in an old archive, the name of a legion, a Gene-sire, a sin, something that will tell them who they are. Until then, they will take what is lost, they will keep what others discard, and they will guard it jealously, relentlessly, until the day they finally remember who they were supposed to be. There are secrets even the Emperor never intended to be found, and some of those secrets lie not in vaults, not in forbidden texts, but in the very earth itself, buried beneath the ice of a forgotten world. The world was called Aurelia. It was once the proud home of the Blood Ravens, a bastion of their early strength, their rituals, and perhaps the last true tether to their origin. But even Aurelia, like everything else connected to the chapter's genesis, would not remain untouched. It would be taken from them. Not by war, not by politics, but by the warp itself. Aurelia was cold and beautiful, an ice world orbiting a pale star in the distant Aurelian subsector. It was once a place of training and spiritual reflection for the chapter. Beneath its mountains of frost and deep crevasses, the Blood Ravens carved their fortress monastery into the bones of the planet. The halls of Selenon, as it was called, were lined with ancient scripture, esoteric carvings, and relics not found in any Imperial archive. The librarians claimed the planet was rich with psychic resonance, strong in places where the veil between the immaterium and reality was thinner than a whisper. It made Aurelia dangerous, but it also made it perfect. They trained there in isolation, far from the gaze of other chapters, of prying Ordo minds. The young aspirants, recruited from frontier worlds and feudal systems, were brought to Aurelia not just to learn the arts of war, but to be reshaped. Some were tested psychically from the moment they arrived, monitored closely for flickers of potential. Others simply felt drawn to the place, like a half-forgotten memory calling them home. It was here the librarians conducted their most esoteric rituals. It was here the chapter meditated, purified itself, and communed with the Emperor in strange, quiet ways that no other chapter would have approved of. And then, without warning, Aurelia disappeared. Not metaphorically, not strategically, literally. The entire planet vanished from Imperial star charts. Vox signals bounced off empty space. Astropaths sent missives and received only silence. The warp lanes that once bled into the Aurelian subsector recoiled, as if severed by some divine scalpel. Imperial officials assumed destruction, a catastrophic warp event, or a stellar collapse that obliterated the planet and all its people. But the Blood Ravens knew better. They felt the silence. They felt it like a dagger behind the eyes, a sharp absence in the weave of their librarians' psychic senses. Something had taken Aurelia, not destroyed it, stolen it. The records state that the disappearance occurred sometime between the conclusion of a major campaign in the Jericho Reach and the onset of renewed hostilities in the Halo Stars. But the chapter rarely speaks of those intervening years. Some say they searched, that fleets were dispatched into forbidden systems, that forbidden rituals were enacted to scry the lost planet's fate. Others say they waited in quiet agony, fearing the worst but unwilling to say the words aloud. And then, almost 2 centuries later, Aurelia came back. The planet returned to its orbit like nothing had happened, no sign of damage or warp burn on its surface. It emerged from the shadows of the Imperium whole, but wrong. When the Blood Ravens approached, the skies above Aurelia pulsed with red auroras, storms howled where none had existed before, and the very core of the planet emanated psychic nausea. The chapter scrambled to respond. Gabriel Angelos, a rising force within the chapter, was among those dispatched to investigate. What they found would burn itself into the chapter's history forever. Aurelia had changed. The fortress monastery of Selenon was in ruins, as if bombarded from orbit, but no impact craters were visible. The ice had receded, exposing broken crypts and rusted towers that had never existed before. Symbols not of human design had been etched into the bedrock, glowing faintly with energies that resisted all scans. Worse still, the blood of the warp hung thick in the air. The taint of chaos was undeniable. It was not long before the Black Legion arrived. Led by Aragast the Pillager, a savage warlord of Khorne, Chaos Space Marines descended upon the Aurelian subsector like vultures to carrion. They came not merely to destroy, but to claim what had awakened beneath Aurelia. Following them were the Word-bearers, and behind them, darker things, sorcerers, cultists, demons. Something had been sleeping beneath Aurelia, something ancient, and now it stirred. But the Blood Ravens did not retreat. They could not. This was their home, their sanctum. Whatever foul thing had defiled it, they would answer in blood. They launched a full-scale counter-crusade, the Second Aurelian Crusade, committing nearly their entire fleet and every able-bodied veteran not locked in other campaigns. The fighting spread across multiple worlds: Calderis, Typhon Primaris, Meridian. Yet always it came back to Aurelia, the heart of the storm, the key. During these battles, secrets were uncovered, terrible truths about the chapter's leadership. It was on the desecrated ruins of Aurelia that evidence first surfaced, pointing to corruption at the highest level of command. Strange rituals had been conducted beneath the surface centuries prior. War bands of the chapter's own Fifth Company had been dispatched to remote regions of the planet, never to return. And among the ruins, beneath the shattered dome of what had once been the Librarium of Selenon, the Blood Ravens found a name: Ulcair. Ulcair, a name that sent even the most experienced librarians reeling with dread. A name known only to the deepest archives, if at all. A greater demon of Nurgle, a warp entity whose body had once been entombed beneath the ice of Aurelia by none other than the chapter itself. For thousands of years they had kept this secret locked away, bound beneath their monastery, but the bindings had weakened. Or perhaps someone had loosened them. Some say it was Kairos himself, chapter master, master of sanctity, and secret architect of the chapter's downfall, who began the chain of events that led to Aurelia's corruption. Others say the planet was cursed from the beginning, that the blood-stained truth of the chapter's origin had always lain beneath its frozen crust. Whatever the case, when Ulcair awakened, the chapter was forced to act. The Blood Ravens launched a final assault, with their strike cruisers bombarding the Black Legion from orbit and their dreadnoughts thundering through the shattered gates of Salinon. They descended into the deepest catacombs of the planet. They faced demons, traitor Astartes, and the reanimated corpses of their own fallen brothers. And there, in the heart of the corrupted world, they confronted Ulcair. The battle was unspeakable. Only a handful of librarians survived to describe what they saw. Warp flesh twisting reality, screams that echoed through time itself, the death of logic. It took a convergence of psychic power, the activation of forbidden relics, and the sacrifice of more than a few souls to bind the demon once again. But the price was high. Aurelia was lost. With the bindings weakened and the corruption too deep to cleanse, Gabriel Angelos made the call. The world was to be purged, the chapter's own homeworld, their monastery, their sanctum, destroyed by their own hand. And when the orbital lances struck, turning mountains to fire and ice to steam, the chapter did not cheer. They watched in silence, their memories collapsing with the spires of Selenon. Now, Aurelia exists only in record, its coordinates sealed, its name spoken in whispers. And in the void left behind, the Blood Ravens drift ever further from what little past they had. They search again, as always, for something else, something to explain why every piece of their history crumbles the moment they reach for it. Perhaps the Emperor protects, or perhaps he forgets. There are wars that win glory, others win survival. But the war for Tartarus won nothing, only questions and scars that would never heal. To the wider Imperium, it was just another campaign. One more world besieged by Xenos and reclaimed by the might of the Emperor's chosen. But for the Blood Ravens, Tartarus was a turning point, a warning. It was the moment the shadows of the warp reached out and touched the chapter's soul, and in doing so, changed the fate of its greatest hero forever. The call came from Segmentum Obscurus, an isolated, weather-beaten planet on the edge of Imperial control. Tartarus was under siege from the Orcs as ever, and its planetary defense forces were failing. A green tide had descended from the mountains of Golgotha Ridge, sweeping across cities, demolishing infrastructure, and choking the skies with ash and smoke. Imperial Guard regiments were entrenched in static positions, but their morale had cracked, and the cities of Louvre-Mar and Desiderata burned day and night. The Blood Ravens responded, led by Captain Gabriel Angelos of the 3rd Company, a strike force deployed onto the planet with surgical precision. Gabriel, already a rising force within the chapter, was known for his clarity of command and unwavering faith. Tall, broad, and armored in crimson and gold, he bore the Thunderhammer, God-Splitter, an ancient weapon whose origin was a closely guarded secret, like so many things in the chapter's arsenal. But Angelos was not merely a warrior, he was a seeker. And Tartarus was not merely a battlefield, it was a mystery. From the moment his forces arrived, the captain noted strange disturbances. The warp was thick around the planet. Astropathic communications were erratic. Reports filtered in of strange chanting in the wilderness, of Imperial citizens going mad without provocation. Even the Orcs seemed drawn by something more than warlust, drawn by something beneath the crust of Tartarus. It was not long before Gabriel found his answer. The Eldar had arrived. Craftworld Bieltan dispatched forces to Tartarus in secret, their sleek wave serpents and rune-covered warriors slipping through the maelstrom like ghosts. They did not attack the Blood Ravens directly, but sabotaged their outposts, struck at key supply lines, and vanished without trace. When Gabriel captured one of their farcers during a brief skirmish, he finally learned the truth. The Eldar were not here to fight the Orcs, or even to disrupt the Imperium. They were here to stop something. A demon, something long buried beneath the surface of Tartarus, was stirring. An artifact sealed in the ancient days of the Great Crusade, the Maledictum. A relic forged in the time of heresy, the Maledictum was no mere weapon. It was a prison, a vessel that contained a warp entity of immense power, locked away by the Emperor's will and buried in the deep vaults of Tartarus. Over time, knowledge of it faded into myth, but the Eldar had not forgotten. They sensed its rising pulse in the skein of fate. They knew that should it awaken, the consequences would be catastrophic, not only for the Blood Ravens, not only for Tartarus, but for the entire sector. Angelos now faced a choice. The Orcs were rampaging unchecked. The Eldar were disrupting his plans. And worst of all, a third presence had emerged on Tartarus, one that bore the same armor as his own. The Alpha Legion, traitor space marines, masters of deception, infiltration, and shadow warfare. They had landed on Tartarus under the command of a Chaos Lord known only as Sindri Mir, accompanied by his bodyguard, the fearsome traitor warlord Baal. Gabriel had fought the servants of the ruinous powers before, but this felt different. Sindri was not interested in conquest or slaughter. He moved with purpose, precision, and always toward the same location, the vault. The librarian Isidore Achios, Angelos's trusted advisor and friend, confirmed the worst fears. The Alpha Legion were here for the Maledictum. They sought to unearth it, to shatter its bindings and release the creature inside. It would not be a simple summoning, it would be a rebirth, a demonic ascension that would bleed reality and turn Tartarus into a new shrine world for chaos. Angelos swore it would not happen. He launched a counter-campaign, driving back the Orcs, harrying the Eldar, and engaging the Alpha Legion at every turn. Each battle brought them closer to the vault, to the subterranean crypts built by ancient hands before the coming of the Imperium. Each skirmish cost the chapter dearly, and yet at every turn, Gabriel pressed forward. But as they descended into the vault, the true enemy was revealed, not just Sindri, not the demon itself, but betrayal. Isidore had changed. The librarian, ever fascinated by forbidden lore, had been corrupted. Gabriel found fragments of ancient parchment among his possessions, torn from heretical texts, daubed with symbols no loyal Astartes would allow near their mind. Isidore had studied the Maledictum. He had begun to hear it speak, whisper, promise. By the time Angelos confronted him beneath the surface of Tartarus, Isidore had already made his decision. They fought in the ruins of the vault, Thunderhammer against warp-infused sorcery. Gabriel, with all the weight of the chapter on his shoulders, pleaded with his friend. But Isidore was beyond reason. He sought the power within the Maledictum, not to destroy the demon, but to master it. Angelos had no choice. When the hammer fell, it did so with finality. Isidore's body crumpled, torn apart by the weapon's force. His soul, already unraveling under the demon's influence, was claimed by the warp. The captain knelt beside his brother's corpse and did not speak for a long time. But the artifact remained. The vault was collapsing. The demon stirred. Gabriel, in desperation, called down an orbital strike on the tomb. The Maledictum was destroyed, or so he believed. Tartarus burned. In the campaign's aftermath, the chapter was commended for its victory. The Orcs were purged. The Eldar had withdrawn. The Alpha Legion's forces scattered. Tartarus was deemed secure. The Blood Ravens left, but the damage had already been done. The Maledictum had not been destroyed, merely fractured, its essence dispersed, and it would return. In time, it would twist its way back into the heart of the Blood Ravens, into the soul of their chapter master, into the events that would someday bring Aurelia to ruin. Gabriel Angelus never spoke of Tartarus again, not of Isidore, not of Sindri, not of the whispers beneath the planet's crust. But from that day forward, something in him changed. He became quieter, harder. The fire in his eyes burned colder, deeper. He had fought a demon and won, but he had also looked into the abyss, and the abyss had whispered back. Tartarus was buried in the records, sealed in the Librarium, marked as a standard campaign, nothing more. But the veterans of the Third Company still remember. The way the sky turned purple, the way the shadows moved without light, the way their brothers screamed, and they remember Gabriel's voice, low and broken, as he spoke the final order. Cleanse it, all of it, no trace must remain. But in truth, something always remains. Tartarus was ash, Aurelia was gone, but the galaxy does not stop for mourning. The blood that had been spilled, the relics lost or claimed, the demon's whisper left in the minds of the survivors, none of it slowed the oncoming dark. For even as the Blood Ravens licked their wounds, another threat was coiling in the void. It came not with demonic fire or heretic cries. It came with silence, hunger, purpose, the Tyranids. The invasion began without warning. The Aurelian subsector, already destabilized by warp storms and the fallout from Tartarus, was struck by a splinter fleet of Hive Fleet Leviathan. No one had seen it coming. No astropathic distress signals escaped before entire planets went dark. One by one, the worlds of the subsector vanished from the charts, not in explosions or demonic eruptions, but in the sterile total silence of biospheric annihilation. The first to fall was Typhon Primaris, an ancient death world covered in toxic jungles and carnivorous life. Typhon was no stranger to hardship. Its people had adapted over centuries, building sealed hives and fortress settlements among the deadly flora. The Blood Ravens had used Typhon as a training site in the past, small-scale operations, controlled exercises in survival and tactics. The jungle was as much a trial as any battlefield, but even its lethal ecosystem was no match for the swarm. The first Blood Raven force to deploy to Typhon was under Captain Davian Thula. Thule was not a man to exaggerate. A warrior of iron discipline, he had faced Eldar, Orcs, and even the Alpha Legion without faltering. But what he saw on Typhon chilled even his gene-forged resolve. Entire hive settlements were stripped bare, bones bleached in the sun, hive structures collapsed, their walls digested by acid. Trees wept resinous ichor where spore cysts had erupted into the canopy. The jungle itself seemed to scream in psychic agony. Thula's forces engaged the vanguard of the Tyranid swarm, gaunts, gargoyles, warrior forms, the usual opening gambit of the hive mind. They held, for a time, but the swarm was learning. Tyranids do not wage war as other foes do, they adapt. Each loss, each engagement, feeds back into the hive mind's endless algorithm of death. And as the Blood Ravens fought, they began to notice subtle changes. Gaunts that shifted tactics mid-battle, warriors that showed resistance to bolter shells, carnifexes that developed new armored plating between sorties. The jungle itself began to mutate, the Tyranids fusing with native organisms to better camouflage, better strike. Thule called for reinforcements. The chapter answered. Captain Aramis, a younger but fiercely gifted officer, arrived with additional forces. Alongside him came Librarian Jonah Orion, whose psychic talents would prove vital in the battles to come. Unlike Thule, Aramis brought with him a different energy, a willful, almost instinctive drive to understand the enemy, to outmaneuver it rather than overpower it. Together they launched a counter-offensive. The battles that followed were brutal. No glory charges, no dramatic last stands. Jungle warfare against Tyranids is a study in attrition and horror. Warriors would vanish in the foliage. Vox channels would go silent mid-sentence. The air itself turned acidic with the rising biomass of the swarm. And through it all, the Blood Ravens endured, recording data, adapting their tactics, studying their enemy just as it studied them. But the hive mind had more in store. As the battle dragged on, the Blood Ravens learned of a new horror. A hive ship, massive, ancient, unlike any encountered before, was approaching the subsector. It pulsed with psychic force, distorting warp signals, shrouding entire planets in synaptic interference. Aramis named it the Heart of the Swarm. Its arrival would mean the end, not just of Typhon, but of Caldaris, Meridian, all the surrounding systems. Something had to be done. The Blood Ravens devised a desperate plan. A poison, synthesized from the unique genetic makeup of Typhon's jungle and engineered by apothecaries under Gordian's guidance. The bioagent was designed to infect the synapse network of the hive mind. It would not kill the swarm outright, but it would confuse it, destabilize its cohesion, sever its unity. The trick would be delivering it. That task would fall to Aramis himself. Under cover of darkness, with the litany of fury drawing the attention of the larger hive organisms in orbit, Aramis led a strike team onto the approaching hive ship. The journey was nightmarish, through tunnels of flesh and chitin, past rivers of digestive fluid, and chambers pulsing with alien heartbeat. Every step was met with resistance. Tyrant Guard, Raveners, a lictor that nearly eviscerated half the squad before Aramis could bring it down with his power sword. At last, they reached the synapse chamber, a cathedral of alien bone and seething tissue. Suspended in its center, writhing in psionic ecstasy, was the Alpha Tyrant, a beast of immense intellect and raw power, the mind through which the Hive coordinated its entire local fleet. The battle that followed was nothing short of legend. Jonah Orion unleashed blasts of psychic fury, his staff alight with spectral flame. Brother Sergeant Tarkus led the assault marines in flanking maneuvers, cutting down wave after wave of Tyranid defenders. Aramis engaged the Alpha Tyrant directly, his blade clashing against talon and claw, each strike echoing through the alien cathedral like thunder. Finally, with a coordinated strike, the team injected the poison into the synapse core. The Alpha Tyrant thrashed, roared, and burst apart in a psychic scream that shattered bone and left half the squad bleeding from the ears. The effect was immediate. Across the subsector, Tyranid forces began to fracture. Gaunts turned feral. Warriors lost coordination. Hive ships drifted aimlessly, crashing into asteroids or spiraling into suns. Typhon fell silent once more, not because the enemy had been purged, but because its mind had been broken. But victory came at a price. Davian Thule, who had led the campaign from the beginning, was gravely wounded during a final push to cleanse a spawning pit. Acid had burned through his armor, and his body was failing. The apothecaries fought to stabilize him, and in time, he was interred into the sarcophagus of a dreadnought, a warrior reborn in adamantium, forever bound to serve the chapter in deathless fire. The Blood Ravens left Typhon changed. They had won, barely, and yet, as always, they collected more than just trophies. Data was stored, biosamples were archived. The corpse of the Alpha Tyrant, now crystallized by the effects of the toxin, was sealed in a stasis vault and brought aboard the Omnis Arcanum. Another relic, another fragment of a deeper pattern. Some among the librarians began to whisper that the hive mind remembered, that somewhere in the endless dark between stars, Leviathan had marked the Blood Ravens, that next time it would adapt faster. But for now, the subsector was safe, and the Blood Ravens had done what they always did, fought, endured, and collected the cost. And in the echoes of battle, as they departed the ruined jungles of Typhon, Aramis looked to the stars and wondered, not what enemy would come next, but what secret. Even in the cold silence of space, the warp finds a way to bleed through. No sooner had the Blood Ravens beaten back the Tyrannid splinter fleet and sealed their grim victory on Typhon Primaris than the galaxy shifted beneath them again. But this time it did not come as a swarm or a beast. It did not come with claws or fangs. It came with memory, a memory the galaxy had tried to forget. Aurelia returned, a planet long thought consumed by the warp, gone without trace, swallowed whole by forces no astropath could comprehend, now reappeared in its rightful orbit, as if no time had passed. But the Blood Ravens knew better. They had seen the corruption take hold of Aurelia before, seen the skies churn red and the ice crack with unnatural heat. They had buried secrets beneath that world, entombed horrors too dangerous to speak aloud. Its return was no miracle, it was a challenge. Captain Gabriel Angelus, now seasoned by centuries of war, led the fleet that approached the lost world. The litany of fury drifted toward Aurelia like a blade drawn in anger, its hull still bearing the scars of the Aurelian Crusades and the Tyrannid War. Gabriel stood upon the command deck in silence as the planet loomed larger in the viewports, shrouded in thick red clouds and a faint corona of energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. The readings were all wrong. Gravitational fluxes, psychic echoes, a growing warp signature that made even seasoned navigators wince and retreat to their sanctums. It wasn't just that Aurelia had returned, something had come with it. Gabriel was not alone. The chapter had responded in force. Davian Thule, now encased in a dreadnought sarcophagus, was awoken from slumber. Librarian Jonah Orion had left his meditation chambers on Calderis, arriving in the sanctum like a ghost from the flame. Captain Diomedes of the Honor Guard had been recalled from a campaign in the outer Halo stars. Something about Aurelia's return had shaken the soul of the chapter, and all its greatest sons now converged on the ancient, defiled homeworld they had once called holy. They did not come seeking redemption. They came to finish something they had begun long ago. The landing was violent. No port or beacon guided them in. The storm-cloaked atmosphere fought every descent. Gunships were tossed like leaves. Thunderhawks sparked with overloads and brief system-wide blackouts. When they finally breached the cloud layer, they saw what the warp had wrought. Aurelia was changed. Not a ruin, something worse. It was alive. The planet's surface twisted and rippled as if in a state of permanent flux. Mountain ranges shifted subtly under storm clouds. Forests, where none had existed before, grew from stone and bled sap that shimmered with warp light. The ice had returned, yes, but not as it once was. It pulsed with veins of crimson light, cracked open in places to reveal catacombs of black stone that reached impossibly deep. And worst of all, there were voices, not spoken, not heard, felt. A low chorus that gnawed at the edge of reason, whispering not words but memories. Guilt, secrets, shame. Each blood raven who stepped onto Aurelia's surface found himself haunted by visions, snatches of old comrades now dead, faces from childhood glimpsed through fractured lenses, even phantom versions of themselves, twisted and grinning, watching from just beyond the frost. It wasn't a hallucination. It was Aurelia remembering them. As the blood ravens moved deeper into the heart of the planet, they discovered the source. In the ruins of the old fortress monastery, Selenon, now half-sunken and reformed into a spiraling tower of obsidian and bone, they found their past staring back at them. Chaos was here. The Black Legion had returned, and with them marched the servants of Khorne, Nurgle, and Tzeentch alike. But this was not a united force. It was a pilgrimage towards something buried beneath Selenon, something even the servants of the dark gods feared but could not resist. The blood ravens engaged with fury. Battle was joined in the broken reliquaries of the Librarian vaults, where books turned to ash as demons passed. In the frozen chapels where old banners still hung, Gabriel led a charge that broke 3 warbands of corrupted Astartes, his hammer singing with faith and wrath. Thula, indomitable in his dreadnought form, laid waste to plague engines and warp spawn, his ancient voice booming through vox channels. "This is not our death ground, this is where they fall." Yet for every enemy slain, more emerged. It became clear the planet was feeding them. Aurelia had become a reflection of the warp, and every death fed its momentum. Every spell and scream intensified the resonance. The chapter needed more than courage. They needed to cut out the heart. Jonah Orion found it. Deep beneath the remains of Selenin, past collapsed sanctums and labyrinthine descentways, there lay a chamber none of them had ever entered, not even Gabriel. Its existence was known only to a few and had never been discussed in open record. Its doors were sealed with a psychic code, unreadable to machines, unbreakable by force. Yet Jonah opened them. Inside, they found the prison, Ulker, the same demon they had once believed vanquished, not slain, bound, imprisoned beneath the very place they called sacred, chained in sorcerous bonds, etched in the blood of librarians long dead. The bindings had held for centuries, until the collapse, until Tartarus, until Kairos. This was the price of their secrecy. Azariah Kairos, chapter master and master of sanctity, had known. He had kept the demon buried, had maintained the ritual bindings in silence, even as he claimed piety and purpose. But the taint had seeped into him, whisper by whisper, dream by dream. And now Ulker stirred again, awakened by the memory of Kairos' betrayal and the return of those who had once dared to cage him. The blood ravens had no time left. Jonah led the ritual, a binding of counterforce, a psychic lattice woven through the minds of every present librarian. Gabriel and Diomedes held the line against the last of the corrupted. Aragast, the pillager, returned, clawing through stone to reach the chamber. Thula stood in the gate, plasma fire lighting the dark like the eyes of vengeful gods. The ritual worked, but only just. Ulker screamed, not in voice, but in the minds of every warrior. It promised revenge. It showed each brother their death, their past, their lies. But the chapter did not falter. They knew shame. They knew guilt. They had lived in the shadow of forgotten sins for centuries, and they endured. With a final surge of warp light, the bindings reformed. Ulker was sealed again, but Aurelia could no longer stand. The warp storms above grew worse. The planet trembled, cracking along the edges of reality. Gabriel, bloodied and grim, made the decision without hesitation. Evacuation. Exterminatus. The fleet obeyed. Lance batteries fired. Missiles fell like tears of judgment. The sky burned. The earth wept. And Aurelia, once home, once sanctuary, once prison, was reduced to ruin. They left without a word. The chapter returned to its fleet, changed, older, quieter. They spoke little of what had been seen. The loss was not just a world. It was the last thread of something they could barely remember, of who they once were, of what they might have become. And far away, in the silence of the void, Ulker slept once more. But not forever, for even the warp forgets nothing. Every chapter fears betrayal. For most, it comes from without, from the enemy who wears their colors or speaks their tongue, but fights for ruin. For the blood ravens, it came from within, from their highest seat, from the voice that led their prayers, offered benediction, and declared holy war with a certainty that shattered worlds. It came from Azariah Kairos. To the outside Imperium, Kairos was a paragon, chapter master, master of sanctity, seer, scholar, a rare confluence of power and insight. He wore two mantles where most bore only one, and for decades the chapter thrived under his rule. His proclamations were decisive, his gaze piercing. To kneel before Kairos was to feel the weight of millennia pressed down. His voice carried the solemnity of 10,000 dead heroes. He preached vigilance, unity, and the pursuit of knowledge in the Emperor's name. But within the vaults of the Librarium Sanctorum, a different truth simmered. Not in texts or reports, but in patterns, obsessions, decisions that, in isolation, seemed wise. Combined, they painted a far more sinister portrait. The first signs were subtle. He began denying librarians access to relics long considered open to the chapter's inner circles. Scrolls once reviewed yearly were sealed behind new crypto keys. Psyker initiates were suddenly rerouted to different planets for their trials. Planets that, curiously, had records of warp disturbances or unexplained mass disappearances. More than one promising epistolary vanished mid-campaign, written off as battle losses with no field reports to corroborate their deaths. Whispers began. Jonah Orion, then an ascendant epistolary, voiced concern to Captain Angelos during the early years of the Aurelian campaigns. The librarians were being monitored, their dreams clouded. Prophetic visions, once central to the chapter's rituals, were being suppressed. Kairos, it seemed, had grown suspicious of prophecy, unless it came from his own mouth. And then there were the recoveries. Kairos personally ordered expeditions to worlds not on any sanctioned list of investigation. Dead worlds, cursed places, sites marked by ancient Mechanicus lore as excommunicate traitorous. The missions were cloaked in secrecy. Strike cruisers vanished for months, returning with sealed stasis vaults and warriors pale from lack of light. No records were entered into the librarium. When questioned, Kairos offered only a stare and the words, "Knowledge must be earned." Then came Galan. Apothecary Galan was a hero. Decorated for his valor against the Eldar of Ulthwé, he had once dragged 3 wounded brothers across a battlefield choked in fire and shrapnel. He was known for his precision, his integrity, and then he vanished during the Second Tartarus campaign. Officially, he died in a transport crash. A malfunction. Tragic. Unavoidable. But Gabriel Angelos found that the wreckage had no signs of external damage. The records had been forged. Galen hadn't crashed. He had been taken. Years later, aboard the derelict space hulk Judgment of Carrion, the truth surfaced like a corpse from black water. The boarding party had expected salvage. Instead, they found horror. Corpses twisted into monstrous forms, symbols scrawled in filth and dried blood. Blood Raven's armor repurposed for mockery, helmets inverted, purity seals defaced, Aquilus scratched out and replaced with runes that burned the eyes. And in the center of it all, a room, sealed, ward-locked, a ritual chamber. There they found Galen, or what was left of him. He had been alive once, but his body bore signs of mutation, black veins that pulsed beneath the skin, a third eye scorched shut on his forehead. His tongue had been carved out. His chest bore the mark of the Changer of Ways, Tzeentch. Worse still, carved in a ring around the room were glyphs in High Gothic. He who binds shall be unbound. He who sees shall be blinded. Angelos ordered the Hulk cleansed. Fire, plasma, cleansing rites. But it was too late. The discovery confirmed the fear. Kairos had fallen. Not recently, not subtly. For centuries he had walked the razor's edge, feasting on knowledge whispered by demons, guiding the chapter not toward enlightenment, but toward damnation. The relics he collected were not simply xenos or heretical curiosities. They were warp engines, anchors, vessels of power. Each one brought back to the vaults under the guise of safeguarding was another step in a great ritual, a summoning, a coronation. Kyrus, it became clear, sought apotheosis, to ascend not merely as a demon prince but as a god among traitors, a being of such power that he would not serve the ruinous powers, he would rival them. Gabriel Angelos, torn between duty and honor, declared the truth to the senior command staff. His word alone might not have sufficed, but the evidence found aboard the Carrion and the confessions extracted from other corrupted brothers in the following weeks left no doubt. Still, the chapter fractured. Some refused to believe. Others, sworn too deeply in Kyrus's private councils, turned their guns on their brothers. The Blood Ravens, always a chapter of quiet divisions and cryptic traditions, erupted into internal war. Not civil war, not open heresy, but cold assassinations, night killings, fleet-wide purges. By the time it ended, half the Librarium staff were dead or missing. The Fifth Company was gone, declared lost in the warp. Their banners stripped from the vaults, their names never again spoken. The Blood Ravens stood broken, hollow-eyed, and betrayed. And Kyrus? He vanished, not dead, not executed, gone. Some say he fled into the Eye of Terror with a splinter of loyal cultists and demonkin. Others believe he had already ascended, his body a shell discarded for a form of pure energy. The Ordo Malleus requested an inquisitorial inquest, but Gabriel Angelos refused external interference. "This is our sin," he said. "We will bear it." And so the Blood Ravens turned inward. The vaults were sealed, the Librarium restructured. Every artifact was recatalogued, every record audited. Jonah Orion became Chief Librarian. Angelos took the mantle of Chapter Master, though he did so without ceremony. They did not celebrate. They did not speak of it again. But deep in the sealed archives of the Omnis Arcanum, a small stasis vault remains, inside the remains of Galen, marked with only a single rune burned into the glass. Reminder. And on that vault, the new inscription ordered by Gabriel himself. This is what happens when we look too long into the dark. It was not a coronation. There were no trumpets, no banners raised, no cheers of brothers in triumph. When Gabriel Angelos assumed command of the Blood Ravens, it was not with glory but with silence. A silence that settled over the chapter like a funeral pall. Kyrus had vanished into the warp. Betrayal had been uncovered at the core of their command. Trust was shattered. The Librarium was scarred. The Fifth Company gone, and the galaxy, always a crucible of blood and fire, had taken notice. Gabriel accepted the mantle not with pride, but necessity. He did not wear the gold-trimmed mantle of his predecessor. He did not sit upon the marble throne at the heart of the chapter's command bridge. He took to the war deck, to the Vox relays and briefing rooms, where battle was planned not in glory but in grit. He was not the kind of leader to issue edicts from a pulpit. He walked among his brothers, his voice low, his eyes harder than steel. The chapter needed rebuilding, not just in arms but in soul. The loss of Aurelia had wounded more than their pride. It had taken their home. Their fortress monastery had been reduced to smoke and orbital slag. The rituals and relics kept beneath its icy crust were lost, buried under glassed craters and warp-scoured stone. The Blood Ravens were, for the first time in recorded history, rootless. Fleet-based chapters were not uncommon. The Black Templars thrived without a homeworld. The Space Wolves, after the destruction of Fenris, had adapted. But for the Blood Ravens, whose vaults of lore and relics had been carved into the bones of Aurelia, whose Librarium was once the heart of their identity, it was like having their history burned page by page. Gabriel responded with relentless purpose. He did not allow mourning. He did not permit stagnation. Instead, he mobilized. Strike cruisers were rearmed, dreadnoughts reawakened. Requisition orders for recruits and supplies were issued to the administratum with uncharacteristic bluntness. Where once Kyrus had used diplomacy, veiled words, and hidden allies, Gabriel used the truth, cold, irrefutable, and hard as a bolt around. This chapter was betrayed from within, he told the lords of the segmentum. We will not ask for forgiveness. We will earn trust again in the only way that matters, in war. And war answered. The great rift had torn across the stars like a jagged wound. Warp storms bloomed across sectors once thought safe. Hive fleets surged. Demon worlds birthed anew. Heresies rose among once loyal worlds. And into that chaos, Gabriel led his brothers not as a dying chapter seeking redemption, but as an executioner's blade. The Retribution Crusades began. They struck at the Ghoul Stars, where cults had risen in the name of the Three-Eyed Prophet, a blasphemous amalgam of Xiantian doctrine mixed with corrupted Imperial catechisms. The Blood Ravens descended upon the planet Gorus Prime and cut a path through the chanting masses, their librarians nullifying warp energies in an act of controlled psychic precision not seen since the days of the Horus Heresy. There was no speech, no warning, only fire. From there, they moved to the Vox Nebula. Here, a lost Mechanicus explorator fleet had uncovered a pre-Imperial AI buried within a tomb moon, orbiting the dead gas giant Vantor. When negotiations collapsed and Skitari legions turned their weapons on Imperial shipping lanes, Gabriel's forces boarded the moon itself. It was said he stood in the data vaults of the core nexus and faced a digitized intelligence that attempted to read his mind, and failed. The data core was destroyed. The moon fractured. The red glow of corrupted knowledge silenced once again. In every war zone, the Blood Ravens left behind a name newly earned. Not just relic hunters, not just secret keepers, but redeemers. They struck fast, surgically, sometimes even against the Inquisition's recommendations. But each strike was calculated, informed not just by strategic need, but by hidden data recovered during their dark years. Artifacts unearthed by Kyrus's secret projects were now used against the very forces that had once tempted him. And perhaps in this, Gabriel found his purpose, not to escape the sins of the chapter, but to use the very shadow they cast to bring light elsewhere. But with each victory, there were costs. Rebuilding came slowly. Recruitment numbers had dropped. Many potential aspirants, hearing of the chapter's internal purges, chose other callings. Word of Kyrus's betrayal, though carefully managed, had spread beyond the intended walls. Some among the ecclesiarchy looked at the Blood Ravens and saw not warriors but a warning. A cautionary tale about pride and secrecy. Gabriel did not care. He was not here to win hearts. He was here to win wars. But his leadership was not without introspection. Jonah Orion became a constant presence at his side, not just as a psychic advisor, but as a counterbalance to Gabriel's stern pragmatism. Together, they led the chapter's spiritual reconstruction, not through old rites, but through invention. They created new rituals to replace the ones lost with Aurelia. New battle prayers, new purity chants. These were not words plucked from dusty tomes, but forged in war, in grief, in truth. One of the first was the rite of remembrance. It took place in silence. Before each campaign, the Blood Ravens would stand in full armor aboard their strike cruisers and face the void. No words, just breathe. 1 minute for each fallen brother from the last campaign. Sometimes the silence lasted hours. Then Gabriel would speak one phrase: "We move forward, for them." It became more than a tradition. It became identity. Even the Librarium, once broken and politically poisoned, was rebuilt. Jonah led the recodification of the arcane vaults, reclassifying ancient artifacts and psychic texts into three categories: sanctioned, shadowbound, and sealed. Only he, Gabriel, and two other senior librarians were allowed to open shadowbound records, texts considered too dangerous to be made available, but too important to be destroyed. This policy sparked outrage from the Ordo Hereticus. They demanded compliance. Jonah responded with a single data stream, a full report of Kyrus's deeds, complete with the chapter's brutal purging. It was a bold move, perhaps suicidal. Instead, it earned them silence, and silence to the Blood Ravens was all the permission they needed. Under Gabriel's command, the chapter stopped looking for answers in the past. They stopped seeking their origin, their parentage, their forgotten founding. Not because it didn't matter, but because chasing it had almost destroyed them. Instead, Gabriel forged a new path, a future written in action, in sacrifice. He redefined the Blood Ravens not as a chapter of relic seekers, but as guardians of knowledge, yes, but also of responsibility, of truth. And in that truth, he found peace. Not in the Emperor's voice, not in the whispers of demons or fate, but in the certainty of steel meeting flesh, of fire cleansing rot, of brothers standing together not for what they were born into, but what they chose to become. Not redemption, resolution. So when they spoke of Gabriel Angelos in the years that followed, they did not call him the chapter master. Not formally, they called him the flame unyielding. And wherever his banner flew, the enemies of mankind learned a simple truth. The Blood Ravens had fallen and risen, and they would not fall again. Some warriors find glory in their death, others in the way they survive it. Davian Thule did both. Among the Blood Ravens, his name is spoken with a reverence not born from legend, but from endurance, an unwavering, grim persistence in the face of annihilation. For Thule, there was no quest for martyrdom, no poetic sacrifice. There was only war, and when death came for him, as it inevitably must for all who serve beneath the crimson banners of the chapter, he did not bow. He rose again, not as man, not even as Astartes, but as something else, something enduring, something that could never again forget what had been lost. Before the sarcophagus, before the steel, Davian Thule was a captain. He led the first company, a veteran of countless campaigns, his name etched into data slates and bloodied honor rolls from the Carvosian rebellions to the extinction of the Quarren enclaves. He was a warrior of iron mind and brutal logic, uninspired perhaps by the theatrics that drew so many of his brothers into deeper obsession with ancient relics and lost secrets. Thule respected the hunt for knowledge, but he did not worship it. To Thule, the best weapon was the one that worked, the best strategy, the one that left the enemy in pieces. It was this mindset that first earned him the attention of Kyrus. During the early years of the Aurelian Crusades, Kyrus entrusted Thule with a number of high-risk deployments, purges of cult infestations, suppression of wayward governors, surgical strikes into regions where chaos influence bled into Imperial command. Thule executed each task with uncompromising finality. His methods were brutal, and often left little behind but smoldering ruins and silence. But they were effective, and so Kyrus kept him close, but not too close. Thule was never among the inner circle. Perhaps Kyrus sensed something in him, a resistance to influence, a moral core too deeply carved to corrupt. Or perhaps he knew that Thule, if ever presented with a truth he could not tolerate, would act. Whatever the reason, Kyrus ensured that Thule was often at the front, far from the whispering halls of Selenon and its hidden catacombs. And for a time, Thule was content to wage war in ignorance, until the Tyrannids came. When the splinter of High Fleet Leviathan struck Typhon Primaris, Thule was the first to respond. He did not hesitate. He did not wait for reinforcements. He deployed with a full company and a detachment of Devastator and Assault Marines, landing amid the ruins of Hive Arctis with nothing more than static-filled Vox reports and seismic data predicting the swarm's direction. The enemy was unlike anything he had fought before. The Tyranids were not enemies in the traditional sense. They had no fear, no morale to break, no command structure to sever. They came in waves, each more adaptive than the last, each learning from the failures of the one before. They moved like a mindless tide, yet always with perfect synchronicity. And as the days passed, Thul's forces dwindled. Still, he refused to retreat. He held the inner hab blocks of Arctis for over 13 days with no resupply, rotating squads through fortified kill zones and repurposing downed Tyranid biomass for crude barricades. His apothecaries began extracting fluid from the slain Gaunts for analysis, testing for vulnerabilities. His tech marines rewired power cells from ruined manufactorums into improvised plasma charges. But even Thule's legendary stubbornness could not bend the tide forever. On the 15th day, a Carnifex breached the inner line. In the chaos, Thul met it in personal combat, and though he brought the beast down with a combination of Melta blasts and brutal power sword strikes, it had already ruptured its acidic sac in death. The blast caught him full in the chest, burning through armor, flesh, and bone. He should have died. His brothers found him buried beneath the shattered remains of the beast, still gripping his sword. He was unconscious, his lungs collapsed, his heart failing. When they recovered his body, they found only fragments of his power armor fused to his skin, and eyes that flickered open only for a moment, to whisper one word, "Continue." That was all he said. And so they did. Thule's remains were rushed to the Omnis Arcanum, where the chapter's chief apothecary and tech marines began the ritual preparations for interment. It was not a decision made lightly. To become a dreadnought is not resurrection. It is imprisonment. A warrior is stripped of everything but the mind, the memory, the hate. And Thul agreed without hesitation. He was awoken for the first time only weeks later, deep within the sub-vaults of the strike cruiser Covenant of Blood. The world of Meridian was under siege. The Black Legion had descended, and their cults had infected the noble houses and underhives alike. The Blood Ravens needed a symbol, a spearhead. They summoned Thul. When he strode onto the battlefield, his dreadnought chassis gleaming with burnished crimson, bearing twin-linked autocannons and a close combat claw adorned with purity seals of ancient design, the enemy hesitated. And then they died. In every campaign that followed, Thul became the chapter's burning vengeance. Not a hero, but a hammer. Where walls needed to be broken, he was sent. Where heretics dug deep, he burrowed deeper. He was no longer bound by the limitations of flesh, only by purpose. And that purpose burned within him like a dying star. But Thul was more than a weapon. He became a voice. Within the halls of the chapter fleet, his dreadnought sarcophagus was connected directly to the Librarium network. His memory, perfect and untainted, was used to verify records, to challenge inconsistencies, to audit the chapter's fragmented history. When disputes arose between captains, it was Thule who often arbitrated, his words measured, his logic unshakable. He never spoke of pain, never complained. But those close to him, Jonah, Gabriel, sensed a change. He had become more than what he was, and less. It is said that he sometimes requested access to the sealed logs of the Tartarus campaign, that he reviewed Galen's death records more than once, that he asked Jonah on more than one occasion what Kiris had promised him before the fall. No one knows what he meant, but one thing is certain: when Gabriel Angelos ascended to chapter master, Thul was the first to kneel, not because he was told to, but because even in death, he remembered what loyalty was. Now, when the Blood Ravens go to war, they sometimes bring the Covenant of Blood to low orbit. And when its launch bays open and the thudding steps of a dreadnought shake the earth, the enemy knows Davian Thule walks again, not for vengeance, not for glory, but because the dead do not forget, and neither do the Blood Ravens. For most of the Imperium, the word Librarian conjures images of men cloaked in blue, wielders of the warp wrapped in sanctioned sigils and layered wards, kept at arm's length even by their own brothers. They are the edge of a blade too sharp to touch, too dangerous to question. But among the Blood Ravens, the Librarian is more than a weapon. He is a keeper, a compass. And in Jonah Orion, that role found its purest and most dangerous expression. Jonah was not like other psychers. He did not roar his fury into the wind, did not walk with the searing arrogance of the gifted. He was quiet, tall but unassuming. His voice rarely rose above a steady calm, but behind his eyes danced a storm that never ceased, a flickering corona of thought and probability, past and future, twisting together in a spiral only he could decipher. He had always seen more than he should. From the moment he was recruited from the death world of DeRosa, the chaplains knew he was different. Not merely sensitive to the warp, but haunted by it. He dreamed of things that hadn't happened yet, recalled memories that were not his. During his initial trials, he recited phrases from ancient Terran dialects, long dead, scrawled equations into stone that mirrored Eldar runes of fate. The chapter should have passed him over, consigned him to the black ships. But they didn't. They tested him. They pushed him. And Jonah never broke. Instead, he grew. Under the instruction of ancient librarians like Ephesos and Master Lorinth, Jonah's psychic talents matured into something extraordinary. He could manipulate the warp with a precision that unnerved even the most stoic of battle brothers. Not through fire or lightning, though he could unleash both in moments of need, but through pure foresight. He walked into battlefields already knowing which angles the enemy would strike from. He knew when to speak to save a brother's life. He once predicted a ship malfunction in the middle of warp transit, saving a full strike force from being lost to the Imperium. And yet, for all his brilliance, Jonah never chased glory. He refused positions of higher command, content to serve under others. When Angelos was still a captain, Jonah acted as his shadow, not a subordinate, but an anchor. The two were rarely seen apart. Where Gabriel brought the hammer, Jonah brought the lantern. But even lanterns flicker in the dark. Jonah's gift came with a cost. There were days he would fall silent, staring into the void for hours, lips whispering fragments of speech in a dozen voices. Sometimes he bled from the eyes after long rituals. Other times he collapsed mid-battle, overextending himself to protect his brothers. Each time he recovered, but with each recovery, he seemed just a little further away, a little less tethered to the now. During the Second Aurelian Crusade, Jonah's abilities became crucial. It was he who sensed the psychic rupture before Aurelia's reappearance. He who pieced together the patterns that revealed Kyros's manipulation of the warp. He who stood in the shadow of Ulker and, through force of will alone, kept the demon's madness at bay long enough for the ritual to be completed. Few knew what that cost him. Jonah spoke little of the encounter afterward. He retreated into the sanctums of the reassembled Librarium, dedicating himself to restructuring the chapter's warp doctrine. He instituted new measures, limiting the number of psychic readings done during active campaigns, insisting on greater scrutiny of warp-exposed relics, and most controversially, forbidding the use of uncontrolled foresight in training initiates. "We are not prophets," he told one of the senior codicils. "We are witnesses. Our duty is not to see the future, but to stop it from devouring the present." His policies saved lives. They also earned him enemies. Some in the Imperium saw Jonah's influence as dangerous. Too much freedom, too much emphasis on secrecy. The Ordo Hereticus watched him closely. There were even mutterings within the chapter, especially from younger librarians eager to prove themselves, chafing at Jonah's restraint. But none dared challenge him directly, because when war came, Jonah was unstoppable. During the Cronus campaign, where the Blood Ravens waged a brutal multi-front war against Tau enclaves, Necron tombs, and word-bearers, Jonah was the one who discovered the warp node hidden beneath the city of Pavonis. He sensed its activation before the first ritual began. It was Jonah who deciphered the overlapping signatures of demonic interference laced into the Imperial census records. His intervention prevented the entire region from becoming a chaos rift. On the ash-blasted plains of Sepphoris Secundus, he personally fought off a greater demon of Tziench, using nothing but a relic staff recovered from the ruins of Aurelia and his own mind, already shattered and reforged more times than most could survive. But for all these feats, Jonah never claimed titles, never took the robes of Chief Librarian officially, though by deed and respect, the role was his alone. He refused to be enshrined, refused to be remembered as anything but another brother in red. And yet, there were moments when even he faltered. After Kyrus's betrayal, Jonah once stood before Gabriel and asked a question few would dare. What if the warp didn't make him fall? Gabriel did not answer. Jonah's point lingered. What if Kyrus hadn't been corrupted by whispers, but lured by the idea that through power, any power, the chapter could finally know the truth of its past? That knowledge was worth damnation? It was a question Jonah carried with him into every ritual, every vision. He never answered it, not aloud. But he did one thing that no blood raven before him had done. He began writing a codex, a new one. Not to replace the Codex Astartes, not to rewrite Gilliman's law, but to create something of their own, a record. It was called the Veil Codex, a living document. Not a text of doctrine, but of understanding. Part prophecy, part historical commentary, part cautionary tale. Updated in real time through the chapter's internal datanet, it collected lessons learned from every warp encounter, every psychic anomaly, every forbidden relic. It was encrypted, protected, and only readable by librarians above a certain grade. But it existed. The first line read, "Our minds are weapons, and like any weapon, if left untended, they rust, and then they kill." Jonah never finished the codex. Not because he died, not yet, but because he understood something few others did. The warp is never still, and neither are its wounds. Jonah Orion still serves, still fights, still dreams. Sometimes he walks the halls of the Librarium alone, his staff tapping against stone floors, murmuring to voices no one else can hear. And when new librarians ask who he is, those older simply answer, "He is the one who remembers the storm." And sometimes, the storm remembers him. There are records the Blood Ravens do not open. Data sheets whose serial codes have been purposefully corrupted, whose digital ink has been blurred by time, or perhaps by intention. Among the vaulted archives of the Omnis Arcanum and the sealed cogitator cores of the Litany of Fury, there exists a silence so pronounced it hums, a void where stories should be. Names redacted, battles unspoken, no hymns, no litanies, no memorials. That silence belongs to the Fifth Company. No chapter is without its ghosts. Some lose companies in righteous battle, entire hosts destroyed during boarding actions against Tyranid hive ships or vaporized during exterminatus-level engagements. These losses are honored, etched in stone and remembered in song. But the Fifth was not lost in battle. They were erased. There is no official report of their end, only fragments. The Fifth were once proud as any Blood Ravens company, guardians of the vaults of Korava, veterans of the Proximal Crusades, and bearers of the relic Thunderhammer Doomshard, once wielded by Captain Lyson of the 36th Founding. Their banner bore the winged raven in descent, a symbol not of weakness but of judgment, that when the blood ravens fell from above, it was to strike without warning. Captain Athen Kell was their last known commander. A warrior of precision and calm leadership, he was a former student of Davian Thule and trained under the grim doctrines of orbital spearhead warfare. Kell was not a man who disobeyed orders, nor one to question command. He did what was asked, no more, no less. And then, without warning, the Fifth were reassigned. According to redacted orders, they were dispatched to a location deep in the galactic east, coordinates partially lost in warp interference. No name remains for the system, no known planetary designation, just a long series of numbers, jagged across an old Auspex reading. They were sent alone, without fleet support, without an escort from the Librarium, and with minimal explanation. Jonah Orion later confessed he had never been informed. Even Gabrielle Angelos, when pressed during internal chapter review cycles, offered nothing but this: I was not yet chapter master. I did not see the deployment manifest until after the storm. The storm, as it came to be known, was not a warp anomaly in the traditional sense. It had no signature, no demonic resonance. It simply swallowed all signal from the sector. Vox transmissions ceased. Astropathic relays burned out. Attempts to translate into the region resulted in failed jumps and partial rematerializations, vessels arriving mangled, their hulls fused with non-Euclidean geometry, their crew dead, their minds hollowed. The Fifth was gone. At first, the chapter waited. Delays were not uncommon. Warp travel is never certain. But weeks turned to months, months to decades. Still nothing. No beacon, no signal. Not even the distant psychic echo of a librarian's death. It was as if they had never existed. But the blood ravens knew better, and the silence that followed grew louder with time. The first clue came not from the chapter's own vaults, but from a corrupted data core recovered during a mission to reclaim a rogue forge world near the Eye of Terror. A corrupted servitor buried beneath layers of cogitator debris uttered a single phrase in fluent Gothic as it expired. The wings fell upward, and the stars screamed. It meant nothing to the Mechanicus, but to the blood ravens it shook old walls, for those were the exact words etched into the base of the Fifth Company's now removed honor stone in the Reclusium vault. Few remembered it, but Thule did. Jonah did. And in their silence, a decision was made. The matter would be investigated, quietly. A task force was assembled under the guise of relic recovery. It included librarian Cassiel Vorn, tech marine Hadris Olek, and a small detachment of veterans from the Second Company. They were given no banners, no heraldry, no official deployment log. They translated to the sector on the outer rim of the original coordinates. They did not return. The single message they sent came via astropathic pulse, scrambled and disjointed. When decoded, it read, "They are not gone. They are looking back. They have built a cathedral of silence. The red eyes remember us." After that, the chapter sealed all entries regarding the Fifth. And yet, whispers persisted. Some said that Kell and his men encountered something buried beneath the ice of a dead moon, an artificial intelligence older than the Imperium, sealed away during the dark age of technology. Others believed they were lured by a false signal into a trap crafted by Sinch himself, their loyalty twisted into something unrecognizable. One tale claims that they encountered a ghost fleet, echoes of an alternate timeline where the blood ravens were never loyal, never pure, and were now being drawn toward their reflection. Whatever the truth, something had changed. Blood Ravens who served alongside members of the Fifth prior to their disappearance began reporting nightmares. Visions of crimson armor without insignia, of brothers without faces. One sergeant went mad during a meditative fast, clawing at his own armor, claiming his reflection wore the same armor but spoke backwards. Chaplains scrubbed the records. The sigil of the Fifth was removed from the Great Hall. Their heraldry was struck from all honor rolls. A decision was made quietly but decisively. The Fifth Company no longer existed, but the space they left behind remained empty. Today, that gap echoes like a broken note in a hymn. The other companies do not speak of them. Initiates are told nothing. When asked, senior officers only say, "There is no Fifth." There never was. But in the deepest levels of the Omnis Arcanum, far from the light of the Librarium's upper halls, there is a door. It bears no markings. Its lock is older than any Mechanicus design. And behind it, some say, lie armor pieces that still hum with residual power, etched with symbols no longer taught, painted in colors that seem to change when viewed from different angles. And sometimes, when the ship sails too close to the galactic fringe, those who walk the decks alone swear they hear footsteps, perfectly measured, evenly spaced, as if a squad marched beside them. And from the Vox, a phrase whispered in perfect Gothic, "Fifth Company, reporting." But when the signal is traced, there's nothing, only static, and that silence watches. Not all battles leave behind ruins. Some leave behind questions. In the vast stretch of time since Kyros's fall and the purging of Aurelia, the Blood Ravens found themselves pushed further from the heart of the Imperium. Their secrets were too fresh, their scars too visible. They were never openly shunned. No Astartes chapter would suffer such insult without answer. But when campaigns were drawn and task forces assembled, the Blood Ravens were often absent from the roster. And so they drifted toward the edge, toward forgotten wars, obscure rebellions, and the quiet, creeping decay of mankind's furthest outposts. There, far from Terra's light, they encountered a different kind of threat. Not a great war, nor a demonic incursion, nor even the relentless biomass of the hive fleets. They found themselves at war with their own reflection. It began on the ash world of Secloris II, a bleak, sunless planet circling a dying star. Secloris was marked in Imperial records as a failed mining colony, its last known contact lost over 200 years prior. The Mechanicus had no interest in reclaiming it. The Administratum considered it beneath notice. But a fragment of an ancient Blood Raven's transmission was intercepted by an inquisitorial listening post in the neighboring system. An emergency distress call coded in pre-Gloriana dialect, a linguistic form that hadn't been used by the chapter in over 3,000 years. And the signature bore a name. Lyson, Captain Lyson of the 36th Founding, dead for centuries. His death, according to the archives, had occurred during the Erebos Rift Cleansing, a campaign that saw nearly half a company consumed by warp tides as a demon-warped space hulk detonated within real space. But the signal was recent. Real, faint, but traceable. And the Blood Ravens, driven by their insatiable need to understand, went to investigate. Gabriel Angelos did not lead the force. His attention was consumed by greater galactic deployments along the Great Rift's newly shifting corridor. Instead, command fell to Captain Varus Alaric, a warrior scholar known more for his excavation campaigns than frontline glory. He brought with him a hybrid force, tactical marines from the Third Company, several librarians under the stewardship of Codicier Neverus, and 2 dreadnoughts, one of which, unusually, was unarmed, designated only for data recovery. They made landfall on Secloris' surface beneath storms that crackled with red static, the sky veined with lightning that forked upward instead of down. The air was thick with chemical ash, and the ruins of once proud bastion fortresses jutted from the ground like shattered spears. But there were no corpses, only footprints. The ruins bore signs of recent occupation, fresh scorch marks, sealed bulkheads, and the remnants of a Vox array that had been rebuilt using standard Mechanicus protocols, but with markings that matched no forge. Then the shooting started. The first contact was brief. A pair of Blood Raven scouts moving ahead of the main force were taken down by precision fire from elevated positions. Their helmets were not recovered. The angles of the attack suggested familiarity, an understanding of Raven tactics, of Raven movement. The kill pattern was textbook, their own textbook. Then came the ambush. Captain Alaric's main column entered what appeared to be a derelict chapel to re-establish long-range Vox contact with orbit. The structure bore the chapter's insignia, albeit corrupted, its central aquila inverted, its talons clutching an unfamiliar orb. The moment they crossed the threshold, the enemy struck. But they weren't orcs, not Eldar, not even Trader Astartes in blackened plate. They were blood ravens, or at least they wore the colors. Crimson armor, meticulously maintained, chapter insignias in place, purity seals dangling like relic threads. Their movements were flawless, coordinated, tactical. They struck with bolters loaded with modified shells, their flamers calibrated to Raven anti-structure protocols, and when one was felled and his helm removed, his face bore the gene markings of a blood raven. Older, slightly off, as if made from a template long unused. What followed was a kind of war the chapter was not prepared for. Not a crusade, not a campaign, a duel. Brother against brother, tactics against tactics, knowledge against knowledge. For every stratagem Alaric deployed, the enemy countered it in full. For every encrypted code they used to conceal movements, the foe had the cipher. In one grim instance, an entire Raven squad was lured into a secondary processing tunnel by a voice over Vox, one using the exact vocal cadence and tone of their long-dead chaplain Veramis. The tunnel was rigged to collapse. All were lost. The Librarians tried to scan them, to feel their presence in the warp. But what they found was worse than a blank slate. It was a mirror. Their enemy didn't just mimic their presence, it was their presence. Neverus, in a private communion with the Librarium aboard the orbiting strike cruiser Echo of Flame, said it best. They think like us. They act like us. But their thoughts carry echoes, not demonic, not Xenos. Our echoes, distorted by time, like a voice bouncing in a broken cathedral. They remember us, but only the worst of us. The fighting lasted 9 days. Alaric eventually ordered a controlled retreat to the polar ranges, where the enemy's movements slowed, hampered by storms, unfamiliar with the terrain. A relic bunker was discovered beneath the ice, a vault sealed with pre-heresy data locks. Inside, they found something impossible, a Primaris-grade containment tank. Inside, suspended in ancient stasis field and blind to the centuries that had passed, was a single Astartes in crimson plate, unarmed, comatose. Markings suggested First Company. His left pauldron bore the Raven in descent, and his nameplate read Captain Lysen, the real Lysen. Whatever had worn his name on Secloris' surface was not him. The implications were staggering. There had never been a Raven clone program, not officially. But if some element of Kyrus' heresy had extended beyond the bounds of Aurelia, if relic samples, gene seed, even behavioral data had been stored or stolen, then perhaps someone or something had sought to recreate the Blood Ravens in their own image. But to what end? Theories flooded the Librarium. a lost splinter cult of the Alpha Legion using Astartes mimicry for infiltration, a demon-forged echo of the chapter, manifested by warp resonance and shaped by subconscious guilt, or perhaps the worst theory of all, an ancient fallback project from the chapter's own darkest history. A mirror chapter created long ago as a failsafe, as a replacement, or as a punishment. Gabriel, upon reading Alaric's report, issued a single order. Erase the name Seclorus from the campaign ledger. Do not speak of this again. Whatever they were, they have seen us now. That must be enough. And yet, the sightings didn't stop. Years later, a Death Watch kill team reported intercepting a force of unregistered Astartes, conducting a surgical raid on a Xenos archive deep in the Orpheus Reach. They wore crimson armor, their shoulder plates bore nothing, and when engaged, they fought with identical coordination and tactics as the Blood Ravens. They did not speak. They left no bodies. But before they vanished, one of them turned to the kill team's leader and said, "This was ours. You had no right." And then he disappeared into shadow. To this day, the chapter says nothing. But sometimes when the Reclusiarch leads the litanies of remembrance and the names of the fallen are read aloud, there's a pause, a beat, and then a name is skipped, not because it was forgotten, but because it was repeated. Somewhere else, on another world, by another warrior, wearing their colors, speaking with their voice, and watching, always watching. The Blood Ravens have never been known for trust, not in the Ecclesiarchy, not in the Inquisition, and certainly not in their fellow chapters. Where others raise shrines to martyrs and monuments to victory, the Blood Ravens raise vaults, cold, sealed, secret. Within the armored hearts of their strike cruisers and battle barges lie entire sanctums devoted not to prayer or command, but to storage, stasis locks, null cages, psychic dampeners. Vaults built not merely to preserve, but to contain. These vaults are not open to all. Even most of the Librarium has never walked their halls. Only the highest-ranking officers, the most trusted tech marines, and the chief librarian may access the deeper levels, and even they do so cautiously. Because some relics whisper, this chapter of the Blood Raven's existence does not appear in any codex or Imperial archive. It is not taught to initiates. No song is sung of it. But every brother learns it in time. Some knowledge is too dangerous to destroy, and far too dangerous to ignore. There is no better example of this than what happened aboard the Litany of Fury during the final years of the Crusade of Vengeance. It began with a relic, a seemingly innocuous data cube recovered from the ruins of a forgotten shrine world in the Cravonus Expanse. The world, designated SR3917, had once been a Librarium satellite facility wiped from existence during the Nova Terra interregnum. Nothing was supposed to remain. But the cube was there, sealed beneath a slab of black stone etched in Old High Gothic that read, "Bound not by chains, but by truth. Do not open." The Blood Ravens, of course, brought it aboard. Initial analysis revealed nothing. No power source, no activation rune, no warp signature, a dead artifact, until it began humming. Tech Marine Lorick was the first to report it. Late into the third night cycle, the cube emitted a tone, inaudible to most, but picked up by the Dreadnought sensor banks monitoring the lower vaults. The sound repeated every 27 seconds, an exact rhythm. And when Lorak placed his palm on the cube's surface, he screamed. He spoke 17 languages in the span of 30 seconds. Not gibberish, real languages, many dead, some Xenos, others forgotten. His armor's Vox recorder captured every syllable. When replayed later, the chapter's Lex mechanics found that the phrases were pieces, fragments of memories. One was the confession of a traitor from the Horus heresy. Another was a prayer spoken in a dialect matching no known Terran derivation, but which librarian Jonah Orion recognized from a dream. A third was a name, Solomon Arcan, a name no one had heard in millennia, except in the vault. Solomon Arcan was a blood raven. That much is known. Some say he was the first librarian of the chapter. Others say he was one of the original founders, one of the shadows who walked in the early days of the 37th millennium before the records became clear. What is certain is this: he vanished, and before he did, he sealed something within the deepest core of the original librarium on Aurelia. Something he ordered never to be opened. The cube was his key. The blood sigil beneath its base, revealed only when heated by psychic contact, matched the glyph recorded on the lost walls of Selenon. A match so precise, even the patterns of wear and erosion were identical. This was no replica. This was original. This was history, screaming to be heard. But Jonah, wise as he was, hesitated. He ordered the cube locked behind multiple null fields and forbade all contact with it. The librarians protested. Several believed the cube could contain knowledge to identify their gene father. A pre-Imperial truth, perhaps. Maybe even a link to the Dark Angels or the Raven Guard. There were those who argued the cube could redeem their name if it contained proof of untainted lineage. But Jonah saw more. In dreams, he saw doors, vaults within vaults, a place deep within the warp where memory walked like men, wearing the faces of the dead. He saw Kairos smiling from behind a mask of fire. He saw Galen weeping in chains of light. And beneath it all, he saw a library that stretched into infinity, its shelves lined not with books, but with hearts, each one still beating. He did not know what the cube was, but he knew it wanted to be opened. For 2 years, the cube remained dormant. It was moved from ship to ship as the chapter deployed across the stars, always locked, always warded, until one day it vanished, not stolen, not misplaced, simply gone. It had been under guard, monitored by 2 squads and psychic surveillance. But during a routine shift transition, the cube was no longer present. The containment seals were unbroken, the vault door still locked, and yet the cube was nowhere to be found. 3 hours later, the Omnis Arcanum received a Vox signal from an abandoned moon in the Antarian Shard. It was coded in an old Raven cipher, long unused, known only to the Librarium, and spoken in the voice of a man who had been dead for 3 centuries. Azariah Kairos. The message was brief. The key is open. The vault remembers. We are not who we were, and we never were. Then silence. An immediate deployment was launched. A full strike force descended upon the moon, only to find nothing. No structure, no signal, no life. Just dust, wind, and a single symbol etched into the ice. The winged raven, painted upside down. The implication was chilling. Somewhere, someone or something had taken the cube and activated it. Jonah, now both librarian and spiritual shepherd of the chapter, responded in the only way he could. He ordered the creation of a new vault, deeper than any before, locked behind gene coding, psychic attunement, and temporal flux fields, not to store the cube, but to hold its echoes. Because after the moon incident, the whispering began, not from relics, from people. Veteran Astartes began hearing voices in the middle of battle, advice, warnings, names, sometimes accurate, sometimes not. One assault marine jumped from orbit during a planetary assault and claimed he had been guided down by a voice he believed was Gabriel Angelos's, only to learn the chapter master had never spoken. Worse still, some librarians began dreaming in languages they had never studied, waking with sigils carved into their skin. One was found standing before a stasis vault, whispering to it as if it might open from the inside. And in each case, when questioned, they could only say one thing: the vaults are remembering us. It was then that Jonah instituted the rite of silence. All librarians, upon reaching the rank of codicier, were required to spend 3 days in the vaults, not to read, not to commune, but to listen. And those who returned were changed. Some came back resolute as if their purpose had crystallized. Others left the librarium entirely, requesting reassignment to scout training units or vehicle command. As if they no longer trusted their minds, no one ever spoke of what they heard. And Jonah never asked, but sometimes, late at night, the echoes return. And deep within the Omnis Arcanum, behind a door that no one remembers opening, the cube hums, waiting, because the blood ravens do not forget, and neither do the vaults. From the moment they first raised bolter and blade, the blood ravens have walked a narrow edge, heroes in crimson, yet cloaked in secrecy. Their name has become a cipher throughout the Imperium, a mark of fierce loyalty to the Emperor, yes, but also of strange behavior, silent objectives, disappearances, and most infamously, an unspoken habit that few dare voice aloud in public. They take things, not looted plunder, not enemy weapons or heretical tech. No, what the blood ravens seek is knowledge, relics, history. And sometimes those relics aren't theirs to begin with. Among the Adeptus Astartes, the recovery of lost artifacts is a sacred duty. Each chapter has its own armories, its own heirlooms, each one bathed in centuries of honor and sacrifice. The blade of Antaeus, the crown of the Hawk Lord, the sigil of Dawn. These are more than weapons. They are identity. So when relics go missing from battlefields, and then, years later, appear displayed in blood ravens' vaults or utilized in their campaigns, eyebrows rise, but no accusations are made, not openly. No one wants to cross a chapter that has, time and again, turned the tide of war, often appearing where they were never deployed, answering calls that were never made. The joke among some chapters, though never spoken within earshot, is that if a relic disappears during a joint crusade, you should ask the ravens. But to the blood ravens, this isn't theft, it is preservation. They believe to their core that every relic tells a story. Every item forged, blessed, wielded in the Emperor's name carries the echo of purpose. And those echoes, if left to rust in forgotten vaults or lie shattered in no man's lands, are lost. They see themselves as the last librarians of a dying galaxy. Take the purity seal of Velkar, for instance, once affixed to the armor of a Black Templar's chaplain, lost during the Crusade of the Hollow Stars, declared unrecoverable, presumed destroyed, until it reappeared on the chest of a Blood Raven's Devastator sergeant 2 centuries later. When questioned, the sergeant claimed it had been recovered on Vorl during an unauthorized sweep through the catacombs of a fallen cathedral, catacombs the Templars had declared cleansed and sealed. When pressed, Chapter Master Angelos responded only, "Would you rather it lay in the dark, forgotten?" And there's the truth of it. The Blood Ravens don't simply collect, they archive, they record, they study. Every item brought into their vaults is documented with obsessive precision, not just its properties, but its usage, its damage, the psychic resonance left behind from those who wielded it. Librarians meditate upon them. Tech Marines decode their inscriptions. Historians try to place them within galactic context. They are not trophies, they are questions. And every answer, the Blood Ravens believe, could be another step toward understanding themselves. Because for them, there is no banner to march beneath that tells their story, no known Primarch to pray to, no gene legacy to recite. Every item they gather, whether blade or scroll or battle standard, is a possible thread to pull, a whisper of a lineage that might finally yield the truth of who they are. So they search, and they take, and sometimes they are caught. On the desolate world of Tarsus Ultra, during a joint operation with the Ultramarines against remnants of Hive Fleet Leviathan, a skirmish broke out, not with Tyranids, but between squads. It began when an Ultramarines tech marine discovered a Blood Raven's Librarian attempting to recover an ancient Auspex lens from the ruins of an old Mechanicus relay station. That lens, it turned out, was one of 5 crafted on Kolth during the Great Crusade, a gift from Rabuti Gilliman to the Mechanicum. The Ultramarines had been searching for it for over a century. When confronted, the librarian did not deny his actions. He simply said, "It called to me." Tensions flared, bolters were raised, and only the presence of Chapter Master Calgar, arriving via Thunderhawk within the hour, prevented open conflict. A compromise was reached. The lens would be handed over, but a complete psychic copy of its energies would be allowed to remain in the Blood Raven's records. Calgar, perhaps sensing that pushing the issue further would cause fractures best left untested, agreed. But the damage was done. Whispers grew louder. Some among the Death Watch began to log specific patterns, relics going missing during multi-chapter crusades, discrepancies in honor roll records, even false data trails leading back to locations only the Blood Ravens had access to. The Inquisition, as always, took note. But every time a formal inquiry was launched, it was met with stone walls. Because the Blood Ravens had proof of their deeds. Campaigns won, worlds saved, demons banished. Few could argue their success. Fewer still wanted to risk open war with a chapter that wielded such dangerous knowledge. And the Blood Ravens were always careful. They never stole for power, only for meaning. Perhaps the most curious tale is that of the thrice-anointed blade, a weapon that once belonged to a Dark Angel's interrogator chaplain during the Wars of Pandorax, declared lost during a warp breach. For over a century, its fate was unknown. Then, during a campaign in the dead system of Nyros, a Blood Raven strike force emerged wielding it, not in glory, but with reverence, its runes restored, its edge honed, and its wielder, a Blood Raven's captain who refused to speak of how it came into their possession. When approached by a Dark Angel's envoy during the next Council of Vigilance, he knelt, returned the blade without protest. No pride, no deceit, just a single statement. We kept it safe until it could return home. The envoy said nothing, but when he turned away, he did not walk with anger. He walked with thought. That is the paradox of the Blood Ravens. They are thieves by some reckoning, archivists by their own. But in truth, they are orphans, and orphans cling to legacy in whatever form they can find it. They are a chapter made not by bloodlines, but by fragments. Each relic they hold is a piece of someone else's story, borrowed, not stolen, held, not hoarded, loved, not flaunted, and in each one they hope, perhaps in vain, that they might see themselves reflected. A name, a history, a place in the grand mosaic of the Imperium. But until that day comes, they will continue their strange pilgrimage into vaults, into tombs, into the forgotten places where others see only dust and ruin. Because to the Blood Ravens, every forgotten relic is a message, and they are the ones who answer, even if the rest of the galaxy never thanks them, even if their brothers never trust them, even if, in the end, all they truly have is what they've borrowed, and the hope that one day something will finally feel like it was theirs. A chapter without a name is still a blade, but it cuts blindly and bleeds in silence. For over 5 millennia, the Blood Ravens have carved their legend into the stars, striking from the shadows of mystery and contradiction. They have fought and bled for the Imperium, even as the Imperium watched them with narrowed eyes. They have crushed Xenos invasions, purged demonic incursions, shattered heretic warbands. And in the end, they return not to praise or renown, but to silence. Because still, after all they have done, they do not know who they are. Their origins remain lost. No gene seed source has ever been confirmed. No known Primarch has claimed them. Their appearance in Imperial records is abrupt, like a name added mid-sentence in a forgotten book. They emerge in M37, full-formed, with arsenals, relics, and a founding date marked only as classified. The Adeptus Terra offers nothing. The Inquisition provides only shrugs and half-truths. Even the Mechanicus, who track gene seed lineage with the precision of a sacred rite, have no clarity to offer. They are orphans of the Emperor, and this has shaped them more than anything else. Other chapters trace their legacy in stone and song. The Ultramarines have their codex, the Blood Angels, their angelic martyr, the Salamanders, their bond to Prometheus and its people. Even the cursed Night Lords know where they came from. But the Blood Ravens, they are built on questions, and that has made them relentless. To know the enemy, they first seek to know themselves. That is the great secret behind their obsession with lore, their compulsive need to collect, to archive, to understand. It is not pride, it is desperation. They are looking for a reflection that makes sense. This search has taken them to the darkest edges of the galaxy, and sometimes to the edge of damnation. There are whispers, forbidden even within their own halls, that the Blood Ravens might descend from the Thousand Suns, that they are the fragmented survivors of a legion broken during the heresy, gene forged anew, their minds shattered and memories sealed. The signs are there. The unusually high number of psychers, the obsession with knowledge, the unnatural pull toward relics and forgotten truths, the psychic dreams that trouble even their youngest neophytes. Even their name, Blood Ravens, carries echoes. The Thousand Suns bore crimson armor. Their Primarch, Magnus the Red, was said to have eyes like burning rubies. Their symbol, the eye, the scroll, the book, and the raven. What better metaphor for a son of Magnus than a scavenger bird, one who watches from above, waiting for the dead, feeding on the past? The Blood Ravens have never confirmed this, but neither have they denied it. Because what if it's true? What if, at their core, they carry the blood of traitors? What if their victories, their honor, their faith in the Emperor are built upon a foundation of betrayal and exile? This fear is not spoken aloud, but it pulses beneath every decision they make. It is why they refuse to align too closely with other chapters, why they distrust the ecclesiarchy, why their relationships with the Inquisition are brittle and full of double meaning. It is why they hoard relics, why they study warp phenomena so obsessively, why they never stop digging. Because if they stop, they might hear the truth whispering through the walls of their librarium. But for all the shadows that surround them, the Blood Ravens remain loyal. That, perhaps, is their true legacy. They do not fight for glory. They do not chant their Primarch's name. They do not expect banners or statues. They serve, and they serve well. From Tartarus to Typhon, from the Aurelian subsector to the Halo stars, their deeds speak for them. When the swarm descended, they stood alone. When the Black Legion came, they did not break. When Kiras fell to darkness, they purged their own without hesitation. And when the galaxy turned to madness, split by the Great Rift, the Blood Ravens did not scatter. They rallied. They became a fleet-based chapter, untethered from planets, floating relics in the void, ships of crimson wrath, each one a moving library, a mobile monastery, a fortress of memory. Their battle barges are covered in scripture, not the words of saints or primarchs, but their own writings, lessons etched in steel, drawn from battle, from loss, from the ashes of Aurelia and the fire of Ulkair's return. Their war gear is marked not by legacy, but by annotation, Notes carved into purity seals by tech marines and librarians, cataloging each weapon's use, its failures, its last wielder's final thoughts. To outsiders, it is madness. To the blood ravens, it is truth. Every relic they wield is a story reclaimed, every ritual they perform, a thread stitched into the patchwork of identity they continue to weave. And though they may never know where they came from, they know what they are. They are servants of the Emperor. They are defenders of mankind. They are the last bastion of knowledge in a galaxy devoured by ignorance and fire. And if that knowledge carries danger, so be it. They will bear the burden. Because in the end, their name is more than a mystery. It is a vow. A raven bleeds crimson when it dares to fly too close to the sun, but it still flies. And it still sees, and it never stops watching. So let the others whisper, let them accuse, let them lock their vaults and cast their suspicious glances. The blood ravens will continue, through war, through shadow, through silence, until the day their questions are finally answered, or until the last raven falls in fire, clutching the final page of a book the galaxy was too afraid to read. That is their legacy, and it is not borrowed, it is earned,